All right, 2 minutes has passed, so I guess shall we get started? Hey, so again, hi everybody. Good afternoon and welcome, or good morning and good evening. Welcome to the Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management webinar. So today I'll be speaking about actually what I realize is quite a hot topic nowadays. That is. Different ways how to extract data out of Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management. Specifically, we're going to be focusing today on BYOD, or Bring Your Own Database, or the Data Lake, the export to the lake, the Data Lake, the new, greatest, and latest feature from Microsoft. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to start with a few words about myself. So my name is Paulus. I'm coming from a company that's called Companion, formerly known as One Click Factory. So I'm a leading Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management architect. I have more than 10 years of working on AX and Dynamics 365, mostly technical roles. And yeah, nowadays I'm focusing on building integrations, designing customizations for the pod together with our partners that we're working on and custom implementation and also on ISV solutions. So that's a few words about me. And yeah, let's jump into the actual agenda and see what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I'm going to briefly talk about Companion. So that might be a new name, a new company for you. So I'll get a bit up to speed what's this name and what's behind the name. And then we're going to jump to the main topic. So first of all, we're going to talk about what is overall the mass data abstraction, why we are talking about it here today. Then we're going to talk about Bring Your Own Database, the old one, the old tech, as I call it, the one that's everybody's still using. So that's fair enough. I'm going to talk about it, some pros and cons, and just the background, what it actually is. And then we're going to jump to the data lake. So I'm going to talk about data lake, the new black, the new orange that is here. That's latest and greatest stuff that Microsoft gave to us. And then we're going to compare data lake and BYOD. What's the pros, what's the cons of each of those technologies, and which ones you should use or at least consider to use in your upcoming Dynamics 365 implementations. And the last topic, I'll just briefly jump to the general integration patterns for Dynamics 365, and we're just gonna wrap it up to see where these two technologies come into the general picture of integrations of Dynamics 365. So yeah, quite packed agenda. So let's get moving. So first topic of today is, let's talk a bit about Companion. So the name might sound for you quite new and unfamiliar. So what's actually is behind Companion? So behind Companion, we are two former companies. I'm coming from One Click Factory. That's one of the companies that now Companion is part of. The other company is QBS. So quite recently, actually, a month ago, these two companies, Dynamics companies, merged their forces together. And now we are one great force that are linked to our Dynamics partners. So yeah. What is Companion? So a few notable things to mention. So we are Microsoft and a Circle member for a few years already. We are SMB ERP distributor. We are CSP provider. We are ISV development center. So we have a direct and quite close connection with Microsoft R&D team. Of course, we are a gold certified partner in the ERP and application development and cloud. And we are Microsoft learning partners. So we are providing trainings, training materials, courses to our Microsoft partners, and directly via Microsoft, even so. Number-wise, we have more than 200 employees with a really rich experience in Dynamics. We have more than 1,300 NAV Business Central customers in Asia on our self-versioning services. We have over 20 hours of Dynamics 365 development done with our development team. We have 35 ISVs and 14 ISVs on our Navigator marketplace solutions. We have done more than 700 migrations and upgrades for Dynamics 365 Business Central and Finance Supply Chain Management. And we have more than 1,000 partners in 75 countries. And of course, we are welcoming more partners to join us and to basically have a positive experience with us. So that's very quick about the company that we are coming from. And now let's jump to the main topic. So mass data extraction patterns and why it's needed in Dynamics 365. So let's talk about history. So in the old days, when we were all having on-premises ERP implementations, and specifically, Dynamics AX 2012 and Dynamics AX 2009, the times were simple, and we had the direct SQL access to the database, so we could do whatever we want to the database. And hey, if we needed to replicate that database to data lake, it was up to us to basically build some ETL tools, some SQL scripts, maybe some SQL SSES services, SSES scripts, routines to transform data, load data, extract data, and analyze it in BI tools. So yeah, we had to build ETL tools ourselves. So that was actually quite resource intensive, and usually we had full-time people working on that. Now, what happened with cloud is that there has a switch to the cloud resulted that we have lost direct database access. Now, for Dynamics 365, I know everybody's complaining about that, specifically the people that are coming from previous AX versions. Now, the reason for that is that Microsoft wants to ensure you a good performance, and how else you should ensure the performance, right? You are the owner of performance. So you need to take away the access for external parties to actually, let's say, downgrade performance. Because if you start adding, your tables, your stored procedures, that will degrade your production performance. So Microsoft doesn't allow that. And that's the reason why we don't have database access anymore. Now, what does that mean? Hey, but I want my data, right? So we don't have that access anymore. So what Microsoft did with the initial release of Dynamics 365, Microsoft released the BYOD, or the Bring Your Own Database feature. And that was the initial feature that was covering this missing requirement of getting the data out of Dynamics 365. Now, quite recently, so it has been a few years that Microsoft was talking about it, but only quite recently, back in December, Microsoft finally made it publicly available, the built-in export to Azure Data Lake. So that's a new kid in town, a new cool feature that was long awaited, that is actually aimed to, in the long term, probably replace bring your own database capabilities, but that's the new tool in town, and we're going to talk about both of these bad boys in today's webinar. So just to give you a bit more context, what actually I'm here talking about. So I talked about technologies and I talked about history, but hey, where do you use it? So there are a few good uses for mass data extraction. First of all is the read-only data integration patterns, where you need to access data that's not necessarily real time. That's where you're going to be using probably a copy of the database to keep the original system not loaded. That's where mass data extraction comes into play. The second pattern where it's really used is large volumes of data. So if you need, financial history to be exported somewhere, you're not going to do that by files or by OData. You're going to use something that's more robust, right? Also, there is another area to use mass data extraction is if you need to transform your data. So maybe you need to denormalize data. Again, you're probably not going to be querying that data directly from Dynamics. You're going to be using some other tools. And another pattern is if you need a synchronous integration pattern. So as I mentioned, read-only and asynchronous. If you can live with 10 minutes delay in the data, you don't need live data. That's where you're going to probably be using something that's related to mass data extraction. You're probably going to be building some copy of database and yeah, creating it from there. Or another use is large frequency asynchronous integration patterns. So for example, you have an eShop which has to fetch customer data from Dynamics. Now you don't want that, every single customer when he's making an order to make calls to Dynamics. So you're going to be getting that data from somewhere else, where probably from Data Lake or from doing your own database or from some other data warehousing solution. And that's where these patterns that I'm talking about come into play. Now, we talked about patterns, but realistically, where they can be realistically used? So yeah, most often they are used in BI and analytics solutions. So again, BI and analytics usually don't access directly the data in Dynamics. They usually access a copy of it. Another uses large frequency read-only integrations where Dynamics 365 is the main source of data. So as I mentioned, a good example of that is e-commerce portals. So you don't want your e-commerce portal to constantly ping, hey, what's the item number? Hey, what's the customer address and so on. So you're going to be doing that from the data lake or BYOD database. And last, of course, where you want large, huge amounts of data to be exported is data archiving. And that's where these mass data extraction patterns also can be used and come into play. So, hey, I wanted to ask you, and probably could you bring up the question? Now I would like to bring some more life into this webinar. So actually we have a question ready. Could you bring up the question? Guys, what have you used so far in your implementations? What kind of technologies have you used so far to export data in your current Dynamics 365 implementations? Okay, so I had actually this question ready. So how are you dealing with your mass data export in your current Dynamics 365 implementation? So I would like to know what technologies are you using so far on getting that data out, or are you using anything? Okay, so the answers are coming in. I'm not gonna spoil who's winning. Let's give you a few seconds. Okay. Okay, we have I think most of the responses already. Cool. Okay, so the clear winner here is bring your own database. Well, I'm not surprised really. That's the technology that's been around for a while already in Dynamics 365 implementations. So cool. Yeah, good to hear that you're using it. We have one brave man or woman who is using Azure Data Lake Export. Congratulations to you. Good to hear that. And then we have a fair amount also of participants who are using data packages to export data or even exporting to Excel. So, okay, I got your point. Nobody's using file exports. That's great. And nobody's using APIs. Great, because that's not where you should use those. Good. Thank you for that. Okay, so everybody's using BYOD, right? Cool. So let's make it quick then. So BYOD, the old pattern that's still widely popular, as we can see. So just to give you a quick context how it actually works. So BYOD basically it works by setting up, as I call it, a sister Azure SQL database. So you need to set up another database. And yeah, it's standalone, usually in the same subscription. It costs extra. So it's an extra database that you need to set it up yourself. Export to database is using Dynamics 365 batch jobs and batch servers. So there's basically batch jobs that are scanning what changed and pushing that to BYOD. Standard and custom data management entities are used for export. So you can use whatever's already available in standard, and you can build your own entities and you can customize the entities. And yeah, so the possibilities are endless. You can also have a custom export projects and define export criteria, so you can really cherry pick what data you want to push to the BYOD. So again, that's another specific thing about bring your own database or BYOD and how it works. And of course, you can set the export frequency as you wish. So that was overview. Now, some advantages of bring your own database. So as you could already have picture, they are really easy customizable, right? You can customize the entities, you can customize the frequency, you can customize the scope of the data, filter it even by queries, by companies, and so on. So really, really cherry pick what kind of data you want to export. it's customizable and flexible. It's probably synonyms here, so it allows to select specific data, specific companies, and specific frequencies, maybe once a day, maybe once an hour, maybe once every 10 minutes. So it's up to you, and you can specify separate entities for separate frequencies. So really, really, really customizable. Another advantage now, looking from the higher picture, is that the BYOD database is a SQL database. So, you know, every Dynamics person probably can already also use that data. So you can use the normal SQL statements and, you know, troubleshoot the data that you're exporting, or even building some stored procedures or some other analytic tools to analyze that exported data from that exported SQL database. So that's again a fair advantage over the other technologies that we're going to be talking about. Now, the main disadvantages of going the bring your own database way is, first of all, cost. That database, that extra database that's sitting next to your Dynamics, it's an extra cost added to your subscription. But you know, every little cost matters, of course. So that's, you have to keep in mind that, hey, this is an extra cost that you need to pay to have that another database up and running. And if you have large volumes of data, you might need a decent performance tier for that database, so the costs can quickly really pile up. Another major disadvantage, at least in my eyes and in other architects' eyes that I've talked to, is that export jobs add extra performance overhead to your Dynamics 365 instance. That means that basically, you know, one of the batch servers or two batch servers are actually doing BYOD exports. And instead of that, they could be using something else, posting invoices, you know, but now they have to do BYOD. So this is an extra tool that's, you know, you can really feel that your system is doing something extra in the background. And this whole overhead of performance actually results in another massive disadvantage that I have, at least from my implementation projects. It's historically unstable. So, you know, once in a while, BYOD export jobs fails. Why do they fail? There's usually a reason, but that reason is usually quite difficult to troubleshoot because, yeah, there's different logs and different reasons. It might fail because of Dynamics, it might fail because of Azure, it might fail because of something else. So it really historically unstable. Of course, people are using it, people are getting over it, building some monitoring solutions and so on. But I mean, generally speaking, yeah, it's not been stable technology, and Microsoft themselves admit that. And as I mentioned, with that unstabling comes another one. So when it crashes, you need to figure out why, and it's really difficult to troubleshoot because errors are difficult to understand, confusing, difficult to find quite oftenly. So you need to check many different places to actually find the BYOD errors that happen. So that's the BYOD. You probably know it, you probably lived with it already. So it's there, everybody was using it, everybody's fine, they know the flaws, they know the advantages, and basically everybody was living that life. But then the data lake came. So the new black, Azure Data Lake version 2 export. So how it actually works. So Azure Data Lake export works in a bit different way than bring your own database. So first of all, there's different technology behind. So instead of pushing data to Azure SQL database, it is pushing data to Azure Data Lake. And Data Lake is not a database. Data Lake is basically a big data storage medium. So it's a different structure and a different costing tier, and yeah, so completely different world, let's say. Another feature, so compared to the BYOD, Azure Data Lake relies on Azure infrastructure. So data is exported on a database level. So it's not on Dynamics level anymore. No business logic is used, no batch jobs are used. It's just pushing data directly via Azure backend between the database and the data lake. So what that results in no extra load on the Dynamics 365 instance. And another thing about Data lake is that it's not exporting data in SQL database, it's exporting data in files. So I think it's Parquet format, or maybe that changed. But basically, yeah, there's a CSV files and JSON files for the schemas that contain the data. So it's not really SQL, but I'll get to that, how to deal actually with it if you want to deal with SQL way. So advantages of the data lake. So the biggest advantage is that doesn't put any strain on your Dynamics 365 instance at all, right? It's running in the background somewhere in Azure. You don't really care, but it's not loading your bash service. It's also cost-effective storage, at least from the storage perspective. It's way cheaper storage-wise than having a SQL database. So the data lake storage is way cheaper, and usually that allows you to push more data than you have in BYOD and do nicer analytics. It allows large data dumps, again, because of the price. It allows, and because of it's running in the background, it allows you large data dumps. So it's actually doing the full data dump every few hours. And also quite recently, there's a preview feature that should be available for the general availability by summer, as far as I remember. Basically, there will be a new feature to enable incremental pushes. So as Microsoft is saying, near real-time data on data lake, that's coming, and that's going to be the latest and greatest, and probably the missing addition to the data lake export, right? So you're going to have almost real-time data on data lake, which is beautiful and should cover your integration needs. Now it's all great and nice. Now, however, there are a couple of disadvantages with the data lake. So you cannot to process and to extract data from data lake, you cannot really write SQL. Well, you can, but usually you will be using something on Azure Synapse stack. Now, if you have your old stored procedures written on SQL and you want to migrate from bring your own database BYOD to data lake, it's fine. Microsoft FastTry has published some tools which allow you to actually convert your current SQL statements and current SQL stored procedures to SQL that you could use on Azure Synapse and on SQL serverless feature from the Azure Synapse stack. So you can still have SQL, but there's also other technologies, and that's a learning curve to get a glimpse of those technologies for the people who are coming from Dynamics background. And the other disadvantage that I had here is, incremental pushes, as I mentioned, right now it's only a preview feature, so it's not there yet. So yeah, if you have live implementations, probably you don't want to use that yet because it's preview. But if you're planning on and implementing right now and planning on go live maybe second half of the year, you can already, you should talk with Microsoft and probably you could use the incremental push to data lake. So that was data lake, right? Now, both of these patterns have their own strengths. Both of these technologies have their own strengths and weaknesses. And now let's have a look how they actually do compare. So first of all, let's compare the old stuff with the new stuff. The bring your own database with the Azure Data Lake. So bring your own database. Why where it's better than Azure Data Lake. So first of all, you have full control of data export flow. So you can, as I mentioned already, you can export selected data, you can select your custom frequencies for the export, and you can do full incremental pushes. For the data processing, you can still use SQL to query that data. And also you have full visibility of export job statuses in Dynamics 365 user interface. You have data management workspace where you're going to see all of the status, how your BYOD exports are actually doing. Now, on the data lake side, you cannot be that granular about the exports, So you cannot really, select the frequencies or select full incremental pushes. What you can do, you can select right now up to 350 tables to be exported to the data lake. And you're getting full table pushes, right? It's of course faster and the storage is cheaper, so it's not a massive disadvantage. But if you want to cherry pick data, yeah, probably on the data lake you have to push all of the data and then cherry pick it afterwards. Now about that export frequency. So right now it's near real time officially, and you cannot really configure the frequency. So if you want data to load every 30 minutes, you cannot do that because the data will be populated probably more frequent than that because of the near real time experience. Is the bad thing? Probably not, but that's something that you cannot configure. And the last one, disadvantage compared to the BYOD on the data lake side is that you have to use Azure Synapse. It sometimes becomes quite pricey, costly to use it. But yeah, basically you have to use it because that's not the only way, but usually that's the preferred way to actually digest the data that you have on the data lake. So you cannot just write SQL statement and get the data out. No, you have to use Synapse to get the data out and use it somewhere where you could, in your integrating applications. So that's some BYODs, let's say, benefits of the data lake. Now let's look at the different angle. Data lake benefits of bring your own database. So data lake has, in my eyes, probably the best advantage, that is autonomous export. So no load on Dynamics 365 instance. Data is constantly present, so that's near real-time experience. Versus, on BYOD side, you are using export on the data management projects and batch jobs, and you're loading your instance. Now that results that data lake should be more reliable. We don't have, much history with it yet, so we cannot tell that, but it's not sensitive to Dynamics 365 load, so it should be more reliable than the bring your own database. Because, yeah, as I mentioned already, bring your own database is prone for Azure interruptions or Dynamics 365 service interruptions, which results in unexpected data losses or unexpected crashes in the export. And then, yeah, you have to figure out where, why the balances doesn't match and so on. And the other advantage of data lake is that storage is less expensive, generally speaking. Now, the Synapse might drive the price up, and you have to really, do some proof of concepting before deciding which technology to choose. But yeah, generally the storage is less expensive, more data can be stored. So in data lake, you could also put, data not only from Dynamics, probably you can put data from, you name it. If you want Outlook, or maybe, some other Excel sheets, or maybe some other legacy system that you have on premises. So you can put all of the data in a single place and then do some really nice analytics in a single place. While on BYOD, you could also put all of that data in the Azure SQL database, but that's a very costly storage. So it might your costs for that database really to wild highs. So that's quick overview of BYOD versus Azure Data Lake. Both of these have the pros and cons. However, I'm working with many architects who are doing custom implementations on Dynamics 365, and we have had our fair share of BYOD experience already over the last few years implementing Dynamics 365. So we cannot wait. In some projects that we are already, implementing, we are already using Azure Data Lake because that's a new savior for us in a mass data export. So overall, I would strongly recommend Data Lake over BYOD. But of course, if you want to export few tables only, don't do anything crazy with that data. Maybe BYOD is also good technology for you. So you have to, do some proof of concepting on both technologies in your implementation and pick the right one for you. So that was the comparison. Now let's have a quick look at where these two technologies actually come into place when we look at the overall picture of different integration patterns and different integration technologies that are available with Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management. So if you want to get data out, what do you use? Now, if you want to get the data out and you want synchronous approach, then you're probably going to be using business events. Business events is the one and single synchronous technology that you need to get the data out into another system. So whenever something happens, Dynamics 365 fires business event. That business event can carry some payload, and you get the data out in a real time. Now, if you want near real-time experience, as we call it, then you should use Azure Data Lake Storage Export or the BYOD. Both of these technologies, they can be configured in a way that they have like 10-minute delay. So if your integration pattern allows you to have a 10-minute delay, it's okay to use those and rely on them for that integration. Now, if you can allow bigger times or you want, with a data lake and with a BYOD, let's say these are still asynchronous integration patterns and you're not really loading the system with the requests. They are querying data from somewhere else. Now, if you want asynchronous integrations, but at the same time you want to have full control of what data are you getting out, there are other integration technologies that is OData API export. So for example, you could query every 5 minutes and get the changed records with the OData API. I strongly would not recommend doing that because OData is known to be really performance sensitive. So, but if you need that pattern, that's there and you can use it. Another good technology is data package API. So if you want, or recurring integrations API. So if you want some incremental data dumps, or from time to time, get the latest data out of Dynamics 365 and not use Data Lake or BYOD. There's the data package API and recurring integrations API that basically allows you to get data, get selected data using data management, using APIs in a package, get that package out, and load that data into your system, whether it's some integrating system or maybe that's some staging database. So that's also a good pattern to use. However, of course, this is fully asynchronous. So you have to make calls. You have to call Dynamics 365, ask, hey, what's new? And then get that new stuff out of the system. So yeah. And our near real-time integration patterns is the ones that we are talking about. Actually, they are autonomous, let's say. You don't have to ask system what's new. Basically, system is constantly pushing those out and putting those in a data lake or in bring your own database. So there's a good use for every technology, and yeah, make sure that you pick the right one in a very early phase. And overall, I'm really happy to see that this near real-time pattern got the new toy, a new kid in town, that is Azure Data Lake Export. So with all of that in mind, if you need help on building your integrations, if you need help on designing your integrations, building integrations, or building Dynamics 365 Finance Supply Chain Management solutions for your customers, or building Business Central solutions for your customers, you might choose us. We have a great experience. We really value our partnerships with the partners. We are always up to date with the latest Microsoft technologies. It's what we have to, otherwise we will remain irrelevant, right? So we always stay up to date. And as we gathered a massive experience in different projects with different partners, we are usually able to sense and tackle the risks in the project in an early phase. So if we see that something's going sideways, we will let you know, and we'll help you to tackle that, and we will help you to have to have the best experience with your customer that you're implementing your dynamic solution for. So yeah, if you have let's say any challenges with your current Dynamics implementations, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to help, probably. And yeah, get in touch with us, and we're here ready to exceed your expectations. Yeah. So now, as the next steps, so yeah, as I mentioned, if you want any assistance with your Dynamics implementation or migration projects, you can get in touch. We have I won't go through this, but we have representation in mid-Europe and headquarters, and we have Central Eastern Europe representation and other different regions. So you can really go to our website or write to us at service@companion, and we'll be more than happy to help. Now it's time for questions. So please feel free to write messages in the Q&A window, and yeah, I'll try to answer them related to the mass data extraction patterns, or maybe or something else. Okay, and I see we already have the question, so I'll try to tackle from the first one. Okay, yeah. So first one, the question was, will the recording of the webinar will be available? I see my team already answered that. The next question is it possible for, or any plans or ability to export data to Azure Data Lake from on-prem? That's a good one. I haven't heard about that. Knowing Microsoft direction, I wouldn't count. So publishing to Data Lake from on-prem. Yeah, now let's think about it from a different angle, right? So export to Data Lake, it relies on a technology that is in the backend of Azure SQL. Now, when you have Dynamics 365 on-prem, it doesn't have Azure SQL, so it doesn't have the technology that's exporting to Data Lake. So probably not, I would think. I don't know the Microsoft official position on that, but understanding the technologies that are behind, I would say that no, probably it's not gonna coming to the finance and supply chain management on-prem implementations. So that's, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, I see another question coming up in the path in the Q&A window. So the question is, are you considering switching to Azure Data Lake? Yeah, so in our implementations, we are very much pushing, working together with partners on implementing Azure Data Lake and replacing the current Bring Your Own Database or BYOD implementations. Of course, for the customer that's already implemented, it might be an extra risk and an extra effort and extra cost, but overall, the advantages should overcome the risks. Okay, I hope that answered your question. And there's a new question. That's actually a good one. So for Azure Data Lake, when you say incremental export is in preview, what exactly meant by incremental? My understanding of ADLS is that once table is configured, all changes that happen to data will reflect in near time. Yeah, yes, that was your question. So my answer is yes, they will happen in near real time. However, that near real time part is under preview. It's not publicly released yet. So you configure tables, they will be pushed to Data Lake. However, they will not be constantly pushed. There's delay right now, and then delay is getting smaller and smaller. But basically, the feature that allows data to be constantly pushed to Data Lake is still in the preview, and that preview feature, it's not really up to Dynamics team. So what I have heard from Microsoft is that this preview feature is actually from the database team. So there's some still preview feature that this export to Data Lake is relying to, that is coming soon, but yeah, I cannot tell the dates yet, but I think the plans are that it will be available by beginning of summer this year, so quite soon. So I hope that that answers your question. Okay. Any more questions we have? Okay. I lost that question, but it was in the chat. Hold on. So I think the question was that is export to DataLake relying on entities, on data entities that are in Dynamics 365? So the answer is no. That's a strange way how it works. So basically, it exports tables. It doesn't export entities. So it exports the tables. You can still select entity to be exported. So let's say you want to export customers, right? You don't select those 5 tables that have customer data. You can select customers entity. That's fine. However, in the backend, how it's going to work, it's actually going to publish 5 tables to DataLake, and then it's going to publish the entity definition. So it's going to publish entity structure. So, using Synapse or other technology that you're going to be using to get the data out of DataLake, you can use the view. You can use that view definition, and you can still have a data entity-like experience, as I would say. But at the backend, it will be pushing tables, and it will not be pushing entities. So it's not running, if you have, let's say, computed columns on your entity, yeah, that's not going to run those. You have to run them yourself on the data lake. So hope that answers your question. Okay, what else do we have? Yeah, so I have also another question. So what's the current experience with with Azure Data Lake Export? So the it's decent with the performance wise. It's decent performance because it's a beautiful thing when you don't have to load your dynamic system anymore. So it really saves you decent performance, and yeah, it's working quite well already, I would say. Okay, I have another question. So filter from data entity won't be respected when exporting to data lake. No. Yeah, the whole table will be exported. So you have to filtering that. You have to do that filtering on a data lake when you're processing, which is it's a different way of doing things. But you can still do filtering. You just have to filter data in the BI side of things versus Dynamics things. So I hope that that answers your question. But yeah, as far as I remember, at least from the configuration side, it's really not possible to configure. But I might be wrong, and Microsoft is constantly updating this. Okay. Yeah, exactly. you added another comment. So filter from the data entity won't be respected. In Synapse, it will be respected because in Synapse you can write, where and so on. So your data entity definition that you're going to be using in Synapse, it might contain the filtering. And then in Synapse, anyway, if it doesn't contain filtering, you can add filtering in Synapse. So you should really be able, in Synapse, you should be really able to filter the data. But yeah, unfortunately not in Dynamics side. But yeah, as I mentioned, that's a different way of doing things, but still all things that you had to do are still achievable on Data Lake. Okay, hope that answers your concern. Okay, any other questions we have coming our way? Okay, I see no more questions coming up, so I think we can close this one. So, hey, thank you for taking part in today's webinar. I hope I bring you some good insights, and I hope I'd raise your enthusiasm to use Azure Data Lake. Anyways, yeah, stay safe, implement Dynamics, and yes, hopefully see you in the future in our projects that we do. So thank you for participating, and yeah, bye.